Hi, I'm Samantha Tan, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Samantha, what a pleasure to meet you. And I guess I should be wearing a Ferrari shirt or at least a BMW shirt to commemorate the weekend that you're coming off of. So emblematic of what you have done of late and the ability that you have gained. Tell me about your Ferrari Challenge weekend and what it meant to you.
Yeah, oh, it was just an incredible weekend. Started off with a high. I had two qualifying sessions, which was new to me. Qualify for each race, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. I had actually never driven this car before Wednesday, which was testing and practice. It's the Ferrari 488 Challenge Evo. I think it has 670 horsepower. So just hopped right into it during practice, got my bearings, and then honestly set a track record on Saturday
Yes.
during my first qualifying. I think ran at 209.5, just I think it was 15 hundredths ahead of the guy in second place. I know it's a bit frustrating for him, but I felt great. So yeah, started the first race in pole position, but unfortunately had a really unfortunate start. I just got pinched to the inside. As you know, turn one at Coda is notorious for being
Circuit
crazy
of
on race. Yeah,
Circuit of the
Circuit of the
Americas
Americas.
for those
Yeah.
who don't know. Yeah.
It's just notorious for, having crazy starts in turn one just because it's so wide. And obviously everybody tries to come into the inside and apex. So I got stuck there right on the inside in the grass. I think I was last at the start of the race, but throughout that race ended up clawing my way back up through the field. I think finished P7 in class, but it was honestly quite disappointing for me after the big high of getting pole position. But kept my head up high, and brought all of those learning experiences into Sunday. Put the car on pole again, with, I'm pretty sure, almost the exact same amount of time gap from the guy in second place. And then just ran my race, came first, and brought the car home clean. So it was just an incredible weekend. I mean, I was the first woman to both pole in the Pirelli class as well as win in the Pirelli class. So just amazing to be able to, I guess, make history with Ferrari Challenge this past weekend.
Making history at every turn is exactly what you're doing. And in fact, doing what you did at the Circuit of Americas in Texas is only just the continuation of a lot of other things that you've been doing. And I want to get into your story here because it's a remarkable one. But let's talk about what, from an emblematic standpoint, symbolically, just what it means to do what you've just done, which is just to step into a car that you've never driven and surround yourself with obviously a team that is performing at an extremely top level, and you're just killing it. I mean, do you stop and go, wow, how is this happening?
Yeah, I mean, well, this all happened yesterday. I just got home late last night, so it's honestly still kind of hitting me. But to be able to bring my own team to Ferrari Challenge, I mean, I don't know if you know, but the reason why I got into racing was because of my first experience in a Ferrari 458 Challenge. So,
Exactly. The
eight
circle is
years
complete.
later, exactly, we've come full circle to be able to actually be competing in this series, to be so successful and having my team there with me. I mean, it just means the world to me.
At 14, you were the youngest driver to attend the Ferrari driving experience at Mont Tremblant in Quebec, the circuit there. And at 16, you went racing in the Canadian Touring Car Championship. But that Ferrari piece of it, that's what got you going initially. That was the hook. That was the draw, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how it is for a lot of people. I mean, once you have that feeling of speed and adrenaline in you, you're just hooked for life. I mean, I was taken out by a pro driver, and just, the intense braking, the G forces I felt, I had the biggest smile on my face the whole experience. And just once I got out of the car, I decided right there, like, this is something I want to pursue.
You were 13 years old and you sat in a 458 challenge, and a pro driver took you around that Quebec circuit. So that
Yeah.
was kind of your first real go in a race car. And then you did get to drive a 458, and you were 13. Is that right?
Yeah, so that was actually before I had even done that experience. So I had been tracking cars since I was like around 12 or 13 years old. Definitely too short to see over the steering wheel at the time, had to put a pillow on the driver's seat. But
Wow.
I did start tracking pretty early with my dad, who's a big inspiration to me. That's just what started it all.
Where did that come from? Where did the love of the racing vehicle come from?
For sure. I mean, my dad's a big car enthusiast, big racing enthusiast. So I grew up around cars, grew up watching Formula One with him when I was super little. But honestly, I think it was my dad's E36 M3 that he used to whip me around in on the way to school that really sold it for me. Just
Hey, you
through
tell
the
them
love.
faster and faster, right? You're sitting in the passenger seat at school, and Dad, can you go a little faster? Isn't that the way the story went?
Yes, I was a little speed demon, like on his shoulder, telling him to go faster. My mom would always like call me that, but I mean that's basically what started it all. Yeah.
Being in that first car going around a track at such a young age, you said at one point you were just completely blown away by the braking, by the acceleration, by the force, everything that went into a race car. Is it then that you knew, okay, we're going to pursue this now and we're going to go down this road?
Yeah, it was exactly kind of that moment, after feeling how precise the driver had to be and just all that, the intense adrenaline, intense speeds and everything. I mean, I wanted to replicate that. I thought it was so badass. And I'm just somebody who's naturally competitive. So I knew that this was a step I wanted to take.
So what happened next? Tell the story of Samantha Tan and how you went from the 13-year-old to where we sit today.
Yeah, so right after that experience in the 458 challenge, I started to pursue getting my regional racing license. I competed in my very first races, March of 2014. My very first race car was a 1991 Honda Civic,
Nice.
I think it was 5 speed. No ABS, no electronics at all. It was very overwhelming. But I competed in my first 6 regional races, I think in both VIR, Virginia International Raceway, Gateway International. Actually podiumed in one of those 6 races, so that was awesome. But competed in my first national series that same year, the Canadian Touring Car Championship, in a Mini Cooper S JCW with Team Octane. Very competitive series. I was actually crowned Rookie of the Year that year for finishing 5th out of 22 cars in the touring class. Following that, ended up moving to Pirelli World Challenge, now known as SRO GT World Challenge, which is a series I've been competing in for the past, I think, seven years now. But started with a Kia Forte with Kinetic Motorsports in the TCA class, and just over the years have been slowly moving up in the classes. Started TCA, moved to TC, in the BMW M235iRs, which is also when I started my own race team. And then
And you kind
moved.
of started it out of necessity, right? You were renting
Yeah.
cars from teams before, and after the first race of that first season, I believe, the team went bankrupt. Is that right?
Yes, it was very stressful for all of us. I mean, like, I'm sure, as you know, in racing, it's most likely a driver renting a car from a team. And that's exactly what we were doing at the start. So we had rented a Honda Civic Si, I believe it was like a 2015 or 2016. And yeah, after the first race at Circuit of the Americas, unfortunately, the team went into receivership. And then the way that the team tried to pay us back, since we had already paid for the entry fees and everything, was they gave us the race car. And my dad and I are just looking at each other like, what are we going to do with this race car? We don't have a team to support us. But luckily, we had another Canadian friend who was also competing in SRO that year, Nick Whitmer. and we ended up pairing up with him and his dad, and that's when the Samantha Tan racing team was born. And then it eventually evolved into us, hiring our own team members, and in 2017 purchasing those two BMW MT35IRs and competing in the TC class.
Now, most teenage girls, I'm guessing, don't spend majority of their time researching how to move up the ladder in racing. So, I mean, how did you find your groove and where you wanted to go and what you wanted to do? Was beyond your father? I mean, there must have been influences in here to say this is the pathway. I mean, if you want to get into motorsports, here's one way you can do it. Is that how that developed?
I mean, for me personally, my ultimate goal is to be in Le Mans, to be the first Asian woman to win Le Mans. And when I first started racing, I honestly didn't think about the whole gender aspect of it. I just knew that I wanted to be the fastest driver out there, right? And that was kind of what motivated me to, keep pushing harder and start moving up in the classes and et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't honestly start taking racing completely seriously until midway through my college career. I mean, I had such a lack of seat time and experience having to balance both school and racing. I couldn't give my full attention to racing. And so I was used to being in the mid to the back of the pack. And I honestly blamed it on my lack of skill, because at the time I didn't know that you needed so much seat time to become competitive, right? But yeah, there was that turning point in college where I realized, like, look, this is something I do really want to take seriously. I want to see what my potential is and really, really go for it. So I started to really dedicate my time. Unfortunately, I did take a semester off college, but dedicate my time into racing. Yeah, to drive. Because look, I was so used to having to skip lectures midway through the week, have to go to a race weekend, race. One time having to miss a podium because I had an exam on the Monday.
You were actually on the podium and you couldn't accept the trophy, right?
Yeah. That was regular for me, just having to balance so many things. And, I eventually came to the realization that I was not able to master either thing, right? I had to really stop and dedicate much more of my time into one thing to be able to master it. So yeah, I hope that answered that question.
How much did that shift? I mean, your attention after taking the semester off, realizing in college that this is what you wanted to do, were you now at a point where you could devote 50% of your time to it? Because obviously you were still in school.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly took a lot of sacrifices. Instead of, having a social life, I had to dedicate it into training and then, studying the rest of the time. It did take a lot of sacrifice. And yeah, bottom line, took a lot of sacrifices and realizing I had to put, racing above everything else. I was still able to graduate in 2020, March of 2020, and I'm very proud of myself for being able to push through college and get that degree while still full-time racing. But overall, these two things taught me how to have effective time management and, really have a schedule.
Was there anybody beyond sort of the legendary heroes? I know you're an enormous fan of Ayrton Senna, who was a Formula One driver who unfortunately passed away too soon. But was there anybody else who you really admired, who would, male or female, who would take the track?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been inspired by my co-drivers, especially Nick Whitmer and John Miller, who have been my teammates for many years now and have always supported me no matter what. And they're just incredible people, both on and off the track. And on top of that, I mean, female role models in motorsport, Christina Nielsen, especially, as the first woman to win an IMSA WeatherTech championship. And it's just incredible. But definitely when I first started racing, I didn't feel like I had many role models that looked like me. And that's also just because I think there was a lack of media representation of women in motorsport. I'm now like obviously much more aware of trailblazers like Layla Lombardi, even when I first started racing, I wanted to be the first woman to win, or first woman to compete in F1, not knowing that she already existed. So just kind of shows the kind of representation women have had historically. But yeah, in general, Christina Nielsen, somebody who's
Janet
up and
Guthrie.
coming.
Janet Guthrie,
Right?
the first woman to make the field at Indianapolis in 1977.
Yes.
I mean, there's, and actually you can go back to 1924. Elfriede May, who was billed as the world champion woman driver and had defeated a 4-time Indianapolis 500 starter in a special race that, interestingly, given your background, my background, being from Canada, at the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto.
Wow.
So there is a history here. It may not be well told yet, but there is a history.
Exactly. And I think we're getting to that point. And I'm so humbled to be friends with a lot of the trailblazers in motorsport nowadays, at least female drivers like Erin Vogel, Taylor Hagler, my friends Tony Breidinger, Lindsay Brewer. It's been incredible to see how far the industry has come in the past few years and exactly where it was when I first started.
Yeah. Why is it? How is it changing, and why has it changed? It seems to me in the last few years, there's been a real acceleration. I saw actually a posting that you did on Instagram with Lindsay as well as Colette Davis. So there's another name as well.
Mm-hmm.
What's changed here?
I think social media has played a huge part in accelerating women in motorsport, just because it's such a great platform in giving us exposure. Also, I mean, series like W Series and all these diversity programs that racing series are coming out with, like NASCAR's Drive for Diversity, IMSA's Drive for Diversity. I mean, I think that women have always been interested in racing. It's just now we're finally getting the representation that we needed.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you, I'm guessing that you receive a lot of messages from people who are not only encouraging you, but want to know how to do it the same way that you've done it. Is that true?
Yes, I do get many, many messages from both men and women who have come to me asking, like, how do I get into racing? Like, or you're such an inspiration. Like, thank you for doing what you do and showing all the boys out there that it can be done.
So let's talk about the year that you had last year, which was in and of itself a milestone. And the fact that you were the 24-hour series overall champion, your team had eclipsed that mark, had gained that victory. Tell me about last year and racing during COVID, especially what that's been like.
Last year was pretty crazy, not only just because of the successes we had as a team, but also just the traveling around, because during COVID, I mean, we were used to getting stopped at the airport, and like me, for example, on the way to Germany for our Hockenheim race, I got stuck at the airport for 2 days here in the US because they wouldn't allow me into Germany, even though my dad was already there on the same documents.
Why was that?
Because a lot of the gate agents didn't really know the rules. And I mean, it says in the system, I mean, that they said that you need a government letter to get into Germany, but that was not the case. You needed an invitation from the series, for example, negative PCR test, but it was really just like the documentation that they were confused with. Just a lot of, I guess, like things for, what's the term?
Red tape, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Bureaucratic red
really
tape.
tough. It was really tough trying to get to where we wanted to go. But once we were in, everything was easy. I mean, it was easy sailing. It was always just getting out of the US and getting into Europe, for example. But I mean, in terms of the racing season for us, we came in as the first Canadian team to ever run a full season in the Creventic 24-hour series. And I remember our first race in Dubai and nobody taking us seriously as this small Canadian team. They didn't think that, again, they just didn't take us seriously. And to come away with 6 championship titles, we won everything that we were eligible for. I think our results speak for ourselves. I mean,
No
I just
kidding.
get getting thinking about it. But
Yeah. What exactly changed for you? I mean, that really propelled you and the team to a whole nother level. But what's happening with the racing team that's getting you to this kind of level of success?
well, again, I think one of the reasons why we ended up joining the Creventic 24-hour series was because of the seat time. I mean, you can't get any more seat time than in endurance racing, right? So I
Yeah.
think that it was my fourth year running that M4 GT4 car. We had really figured the car out, and I was obviously very comfortable in the car. But yeah, I mean, all that seat time really sealed the deal for me, and it allowed me to just like start working on the very precise things, getting those last 2/10 out of the corner or in a lap, for example. Yeah.
So endurance racing, for those who don't know, I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. Tell me what it's like to be in an endurance race and
Oh,
what you have to put up with.
endurance racing is super hectic. I mean, it's a 24-hour race sometimes, and it's a full 24-hour race. You don't drive the full 24 hours. That would be insane. But you have four or five other, or four, three or four co-drivers that you can lean on. In the 24-hour series specifically, we can run 2 hours maximum at one time. So I, for example, can go in for 2 hours. My co-driver gets in for maybe an hour, single stint, and then I can get back in for another 2 hours. And you just keep going until the race ends. But I mean, waking up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and having your team telling you need to get in the car, it's just you need to put yourself in that mindset right away and be on it. I mean, it's pretty incredible to see how much effort goes into a 24-hour race, not only for the drivers, but the team, the engineers, all the strategy that goes into it. I mean, that's exactly why I love endurance racing. I mean, it's truly a team effort.
Did you ever think that endurance racing would be something you'd gravitate toward? I mean, when you started out, I mean, what was the appeal of it initially?
I mean, I didn't think I would get into endurance racing, honestly. I thought I was always going to be in sprint racing, but as I grew as a driver, I realized one of my greatest strengths is my consistency, my ability to run within like 3/10 of a second per lap. So we knew that I think this is where I should be.
Yeah. And Le Mans, obviously, as you mentioned earlier, being a goal, how difficult is that to achieve? How hard is it to get to Le Mans?
It is extremely difficult to get into Le Mans. I always like to relate it to being like the racing Olympics because you have to be really good to get there. You need an invitation to get there. Unlike in most of racing, I mean, you could pay your way into getting a drive. Le Mans is not like that. You definitely need to have the skills to be able to get there.
Have you talked to others who have competed and have they given you any pointers on how to get there?
Oh, not yet. But actually, my driving coach, Nick Janssen, has competed in Le Mans for the past, I believe, 13 years maybe now. So I have a pretty good gauge, and he's been guiding me for the past 2, 3 years, and I attribute a lot of my success to him. Just want to give him a little thank you for that.
Wonderful. You certainly had the chance to see the world. You were just in Dubai earlier this year. You're headed to Tuscany soon. In your wildest dreams, I mean, racing has given you the opportunity to see other cultures and certainly other places that I'm guessing you didn't think you were gonna get to. What's been the most gratifying for you?
Oh man, I mean, it's been crazy being able to visit all the different tracks around the world the past year, especially some of the F1 tracks. I went to Circuit Barcelona, Catalunya last
Hmm.
year for the 24-hour race. We were supposed to do the 24-hour Portimao, but unfortunately that did get canceled due to COVID. Um, Abu Dhabi, another big F1 track. It's just been incredible to see and being able to even experience it during this pandemic. I mean, I feel so lucky to be able to do what I'm doing right now. Um, and yeah, it's just been incredible.
Has the racing community in other circuits and other teams and drivers reached out to you to acknowledge what it is that you're doing?
Yes, and especially I think this past weekend has just been incredible to me to see how much support I've been getting, I guess. Um,
I mean, the racing
this
community is taking notice here of what you're
Oh, for
doing.
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I've received so many messages, not only from like my friends, family, but just fans and new fans and other teams, even other drivers who stopped me on my way home yesterday to congratulate me. I mean, the support has been overwhelming and it's just amazing to see.
Let's talk about your own car. You have an interesting vehicle. You still have the 2011 M1, 1M, 1M.
1M.
I'm sorry, 1M. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm traumatized by how many people have called my car the M1.
No, no, there's a big difference. Yeah, there's a big difference. Do you still have it?
Yes, I do. So it's a 2011 1M in Valencia Orange. I've had it ever since I was 15 years old. It was the car I learned how to drive manual in, and a car that I will attribute most of my obsession with cars for. I mean, I grew up with that car. I've been to so many car meets and met so many people because of that. So it holds a very special place in my heart.
And your father actually acquired it on a European delivery in Munich, right?
Yes.
How interesting that you would end up racing BMWs.
I know. I mean, it's
What's the
just
connection there? I mean, that's crazy.
I mean, he's a big BMW fan, and I think that's why I'm also a big BMW fan. I grew up around them my whole life. And, this connection with the 1M as well, to be able to, now work with the brand and race for the brand. It's just a dream come true to me. I mean, what a journey it's been the past 8 years. Never in my wildest dreams would I ever think that I would be racing with BMW Motorsport.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, again, like they've been so incredibly supportive, and I can't thank them enough.
You said that when asked the question what a car means to you, and the question was posed, is it aspirational achievement? Is it functional tool? Is it a stress reliever? You said it's all the above. You said it's everything. And it can certainly take you from point A to point B, but it's so much more than that. You elaborate on that for me?
For sure. I mean, yes, car can take you from point A to point B, but it's also something that you can enjoy doing during that time. I One of my greatest stress relievers is going on late night drives or doing canyon runs in my little 1M and just having some really good music on. I mean, it's just cars are very special to me, not only for their function, but exactly how they make me feel. And I think it's that feeling that, that's why the car community is so big nowadays, right?
The car community is changing because the product is changing too. What's your view on the electrification of vehicles?
I am a big supporter of sustainability. We've actually launched a program to plant as many trees as possible to carbon offset our races. So again, sustainability is very important to me, and I respect the way that manufacturers are going towards electric, but also as a gearhead, I mean, nothing can ever replace the sound of an NAV12, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think, as I've said in a previous interview, I know that like electric is the future, but I still think that, electric or gas powered vehicles are still going to be around for car enthusiasts to enjoy.
What's next for you?
Oh man, well, I have a full 5-year plan. I think we are
Okay.
already on the third year of this, but hopefully next year I will be racing in Asian Le Mans as well as the IMSA Endurance Racing Series.
IMSA
So
is next for you. Okay.
yes, yes.
Okay.
I mean, as you know, IMSA is the top sports car series, and as you know, the budget pretty much triples in IMSA. So I mean, this past few years has been not only for gaining seat time and experience, but also building the relationships with a lot of my sponsors and partners to be able to get to that next step.
Does open wheel appeal to you still?
It it did, and I had an experience in a Formula 1600. I think it was 5 years ago now, and man, those things are so much fun. I mean, the amount of grip, how late you can brake is like nothing other. But I mean, again, open wheel is much more expensive than sports car racing, and you also really can't bump into people or do anything like that. And I think rubbing is racing. And so that's something that's definitely appealed to me in sports car racing, and something that I will continue to pursue.
If you were to give advice to aspiring those folks we talked about earlier, the ones who are reaching out to you asking you how to pursue this, or the appropriate way to make it work, what is that advice to those aspiring drivers? I mean, you've gone through so many iterations of this journey that you're on now. What have you learned the most?
Well, I think the unspoken elephant in the room is how much racing costs and how much funding you need. So what I always tell people is that you need to learn how to market yourself as effectively as possible. You need to be ready to seize any and every opportunity that you can, and be willing to make the necessary sacrifices in order to achieve that goal. But it really all comes down to, that hard work and dedication. You can do anything you set your mind to. And whenever you try anything new, you're sometimes going to fail. And it's about not being scared of that failure. Learning, you're always learning, right? When you fail, you eliminate a method that won't work. And from failure, we learn, grow, and succeed. And so just keep pushing.
You sound like you have definitely studied, read, and honed the idea around goal setting. Is there anything outside of racing that you gravitate toward in order to reaffirm a lot of that goal setting, those beliefs that you have?
Honestly, racing is just the constant pursuit of perfection, right? I don't think there's anything else in my life that I gravitate towards to, achieve those goals. I think racing has really like defined that for me.
Yeah, sure. If you weren't racing, what would you be doing?
Ooh, tough question. Well, on the side, I actually am also a pretty avid gamer. I play piano and I'm an artist as well. I mean, I've had a lot of my friends tell me that, oh, if you weren't a race car driver, you'd be a tattoo artist. So maybe that's what I'd be doing.
Yeah, for sure. And you are completely out of school now, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, so it is racing full time. You spend a lot of time in the garage?
Yes, I don't, honestly, to be completely honest, I don't really wrench on the cars. I'd love to learn, but I leave that up to the experts. I just actually opened my own race shop in Southern California here, in Santa Ana, actually, this past October. So I've been running that as well as focusing on my racing.
And what are you doing in the race shop? What's the business model there?
So it's a full service race shop. We do everything from storage, setup, transport of race cars or street cars. We do plan to expand it into street car modifications, but for now, we're just your one-stop shop for everything racing.
Wow. Is there much competition for that in the area?
I mean, we do have some pretty big competitors out here. GMG's out here as well. James is a good friend, but I mean, I think there was a lack of that service. I mean, when I go to a lot of track days here locally, and I wanted the, opportunity to drive a race car on the track. And previously, my race team just basically goes to each event and the truck stays there. So I never was able to bring out my own race car. So I was constantly looking for a team or somebody to support M4 GT4 at these local track events, and I couldn't find anybody for a reasonable price. And so that's exactly what we wanted to offer and try and fill that niche, basically.
This show is called Cars and Culture, and I want to emphasize the latter part of that for a moment. What does auto racing in the automotive world culturally mean to you?
I personally, for me, I feel that like the auto racing community and the car community are very different. You rarely see a lot of, I guess, car racers that are also diehard like car enthusiasts. When I talk to some of my friends, they're like, "Oh, I just don't want to think about work." I guess like racing is work to them. But I mean, I think a lot of people in the car community look to racing as like the end goal. I mean, it's something I know a lot of my friends in Global Time Attack are pursuing as well, like professional racing.
Yeah, for sure. And another cultural aspect here that's different is the fact that you are Canadian. And the Canadian racing community is a very small one. It's very, very close knit. I mean, I can think of the Paul Tracy's, throughout time, Jacques Villeneuve, obviously, and his father Gilles. I'm guessing as you've become more successful, the Canadian community has also gravitated toward your own achievements. Is that right?
Yes, and I mean, Canada has no shortage of talented drivers, but however, unfortunately, I think that the Canadian motorsport industry is much smaller than that in obviously the US and Europe. So that's what gravitated me towards, Pirelli World Challenge or racing overseas. But I mean, it's been awesome to represent Canada and show that we do have talented drivers and just being able to, yeah, show the Canadian flag everywhere I go.
And you're also Chinese.
Yes.
So what does the Chinese racing community look like? I know in Formula One that there are a couple of entrants who have come onto the scene, but what does that look like?
I only recently started getting more in touch with like my Chinese side of my culture.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up in a very small Canadian community north of Toronto called Stouffville. I'm sure, I don't know if a lot of people have heard of this small town, but I was used to being, the only Asian student in my class for many, many years. So finally, when I moved to Irvine and I was surrounded by more people who looked like me, I felt like it was kind of a culture shock for me, honestly. Um,
I bet.
so it's only been recently that I've started to realize like how beautiful my culture and heritage is and being proud of it. So, I mean, I know that there aren't that many Chinese female racing drivers in the world. Unfortunately, I know there's a very small number of Asian female racing drivers in the world right now. I know Miki Koyama, is that her? Is that how you pronounce it? Juju Noda is a big name as well. Keiko Ihara. But most of them, I think, come from that. I mean, Japan just has such a big car culture, and I think like that has inspired a lot of Japanese drivers to enter racing. But I don't think the Chinese racing community is that big. I'm very proud to see that there is the first Chinese driver in F1. But again, still a part of still learning about my culture and trying to get more in touch with it.
Do you feel like a trailblazer, Samantha?
I mean, I get that a lot. Sometimes I do have to stop and think about my achievements and exactly what it means for, the women and Asian community. I do think I'm a trailblazer. I mean, as somebody who came from a culture who doesn't like talk about their feelings really, um, it's hard for me to, I guess, admit that. But to look back at all the achievements I've had and to see what kind of impact it's having on not only, the Asian community, the racing community, it's just been incredible to see. And I'm so proud of myself for being able to inspire and empower others to pursue their dreams.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Thank you.
What would you tell your younger self, the 13-year-old, if you were going to have a conversation now about where you are in racing?
Oh man.
I told you, no easy ones on this show.
What would I tell my 13-year-old self? Stop doubting yourself because you can do it. I mean, never in my wildest dreams that I think that I would be where I am today with the amount of support I've, had from fans, from my team, my family. I mean, there's so much opportunity out there for you, girl. You just got to believe in yourself and keep pushing.
And if we talk again a year from now, what will you have wanted to accomplish in 2022?
Ooh,
You
I
want that,
hope.
you want that invite from Le Mans, don't you?
Yes, sir. Well, that's exactly why I'm planning to join Asian Le Mans next year, is to hopefully get that invite to Le Mans. But this year I'm competing in 3 series, both 24-hour series, SRO GT World Challenge, and Ferrari Challenge. So let's hope for more podiums, more wins, and hopefully much more championship titles.
Well, and what's the possibility of the team? How much can the team grow and expand and do different things?
Um, I mean, obviously, it's much more expensive to bring my own team overseas, instead of, for example, me renting a ride. But I hope to be able to grow the team to the point where I can take them everywhere with me. I mean, that's my name on that team, and I just want to show people that, not to underestimate us.
Samantha, thank you for telling your story here on Cars and Culture. We wish you the best of luck and all of the circuits that you have to come. Do you get to enjoy Tuscany at all?
Yes, I get to enjoy lots of pasta. I'm going like a week beforehand just for that.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
The automobile is one of the most important inventions that revolutionized the modern world. In America, the rich history of car culture runs deep as technology continues to shape the future of the industry. Jason Stein,
former publisher of Automotive News,
is here to share the stories of people passionate about cars, from industry leaders and innovators to car-obsessed celebrities. Buckle up as Jason takes you inside the boardroom, onto the track, and around the bend on Cars and Culture on SiriusXM Business Radio.